And welcome, Coach Franny, to a Cup of Clarity podcast. It's so wonderful to have you here today.
It is so wonderful to be here. I appreciate the invitation and opportunity.
Absolutely. You are one of those people that I follow on Instagram, and I know we mutually follow each other. And we met about a year ago interestingly enough, we were both at a women's, so we were both speakers at a women's summit, and we kind of hit it off, and we've sort of remained in contact since. But I have to tell you that your Instagram account, I wish I had it when my daughter was somewhere around 2 or 3 or 4 because it would have helped me so much as a parent. You give great tips there and a lot of great content to help parents, and that's why I wanted to invite you here today as we're getting ready to return back to school and let you impart your amazing coaching wisdom, parenting coaching wisdom on our listeners today who are parents. But before we get started, I like to always ask my guests, Fran, what are you grateful for today?
I am grateful for my husband's big, beautiful, wonderful personality. He's a super dynamic guy and he knows every single neighbor. And because of that, today my dog got out and
Oh.
and so this neighbor who I have no idea who he is, but he knew my husband and he knew right where to bring our dog.
Oh, that's amazing.
Grateful for my neighbor, but then I was thinking to myself, sometimes like I get annoyed with my husband because we can't go down the street without him. How's this? How's that? And then, and he's so sweet, and I saw the benefits of that today.
Oh, that's wonderful. Was the dog out for very long?
So actually, I live on the water, and she got out of our backyard on our seawall and was going through other people's backyards.
Oh, no.
And she probably was gone for like 10 minutes, and
Okay.
I had not a clue.
So great that your husband knew the neighbors. There we go. So
Yeah.
we're grateful
No,
for him today. Fran, you are, I think something that we share mutually is that we're both longtime educators. You're an educator, you're a parenting coach. Amongst that, you are a behavioral consultant. You're a social emotional learning specialist, and you're also a certified instructor for conscious discipline. I mean, a lot of different things that you have done in your career, which I know is extensive. When did you make the transition to become a parenting coach?
So I just want to clarify one thing. I was a certified instructor with conscious
Okay.
discipline for many years. I still practice conscious discipline as a parent. It's also an evidence-based framework that I use with families and with schools. But in about 2019, I decided to resign from the company. I wanted to explore some other approaches
Right.
that align all with conscious discipline.
Of course.
At the end of the day, conscious discipline is non-punitive, it's non-adversarial,
Right.
it focuses on self-regulation versus behavior modification, and those are really important factors to me. But when did I decide to become a parenting coach? It's already been a really long time. I think it was already about 12 years ago.
Wow.
I made a choice to leave the classroom, which was really hard. And I was already acting as a parenting coach when I was in the classroom, spending a lot of time counseling parents,
Yeah.
and trying to find ways to help them help their children when they weren't at school. And then I founded a learning center. It's called Learning Lab Florida. It's still open. My best friend is now the sole owner of it.
Wonderful.
And my job mostly when I was there was the parent coaching, the teacher training, really trying to teach the grown-ups of this world all the fabulous ways that we can connect with children. And it always starts with seeing them differently.
Yes.
So, how do we make those leaps, especially when we have these mental models of who we are as disciplinarians or as
Right.
parents or as educators and who our children are supposed to be? So, we got to do a little rewiring around that. And then we can start learning some new skills.
Absolutely. And I love you use the word connect, because I think that's so important that as parents, we connect with our children on a daily basis. And I think sometimes our world as parents is so busy that we kind of forget the fine details of what connection means. And so I know that's a lot of what we're going to talk today about with your mindful-ish parenting. But I want to start with a quote that is on your Instagram account, which is at Coach_Franny, that says, "I came to parenting the way most of us do, knowing nothing and trying to learn everything." And that's by Maya Bialik, which I think she was one of what was the show she was on? She was the actress on one of the shows from Blossom, I think, many, many years ago. But I want to talk a little bit about how that is true for most of us. I've always said that when we leave the hospital, they don't hand us the ultimate parenting book, right? We're not saying, okay, here you go. When you have an issue, turn to page 47, chapter 5, and that'll answer your question. There is no one parenting book that gives us everything we need. So tell us a little bit about how we're all just really trying to do the best that we can as parents, and share a little bit about your parenting journey, because I know it is unique.
So, I love to say that Earth is our classroom, and there are many people in the spiritual world that say relationships are our assignments. And
Yes.
I believe that when we are adults, when we are significant in the life of a child, whether it's our own child or a child that we're close to or we're educating, there is humongous opportunity for us to learn and grow from that relationship. One of the big fallacies I think that we believe as adults is that the child's going to learn and grow from us. It's a two-way street.
Agreed.
And so I really believe that we must look at every single one of these relationships as a treasure, and we must treat it as a treasure. And so we have to be really careful what we do within that relationship. And when we're in relationship with people, there is this connection that hopefully grows when it's a true, authentic connection. And from there, we get cooperation. So, in order for us to be able to have this cooperation we're seeking, we really have to take the time to create the environment, and we're part of the environment as the adults.
Yeah.
For how we're going to be with our children. And my parenting journey is very interesting. So I started off as a middle school science teacher. And when I was in college, I loved teaching. I always had a knack for those children that had challenging and concerning behaviors.
Right.
But I didn't want to deal with little kids. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't want to worry about lunch money. I didn't want to worry about who had to go to the bathroom. So I really gravitated more towards middle school. And I
Right.
don't
More independent at that age, obviously.
more independent. And I don't think I'm smart enough in science to teach high school. But
Oh,
so
yeah.
middle school became a great landing space for me. And I worked for an alternative outreach program. We we educated children who had been previously incarcerated, or
Wow.
children who were detained, whether at Guantanamo or at Chrome Detention Center. So we had a really interesting mix of students. We had students that had definitely challenging behaviors or concerning behaviors because there was some kind of criminal activity,
Mm,
or we had children that were here new to this country. A lot of them went through a lot of trauma to leave
yeah.
where they were coming from, new to a place that where they're now being put into a school where they're mixed with other children that it was an interesting mix. We'll put it that way.
Sure.
Um, but I loved my students and I always connected with them. And that was my secret sauce, connection before correction. It was always about learning about who they are and how they show up. And, as an educator, we're often looking at what's their learning style. We want to know,
Mm,
are they more of a visual learner, auditory,
right.
kinesthetic, tactile? But we have to go deeper. And what I would look at is, how is this person more of a morning person or an afternoon person? Does this person like to share things about themselves or not? Does this person talk about their parents or do they not talk about their
Right.
parents? What are the ways that they connect with other people? How can I best connect with them? So I have all this background and I'm doing great as an educator. I think who's going to be a better mom than me? And woo, I put out a challenge to the universe, apparently, because I was blessed with my first son. And when he was about 15 months old, I knew something was going on different. I didn't know
Right.
what it was. Again, I didn't have that experience at that time with the little ones. But what I did know is that I was unraveling.
Mm,
I was not being supportive of this little person who was having his own hard time. I was judging his behavior. I was like, what does this mean? I was projecting, who is he going to be in 20 years from now?
right. We do
Yeah,
that.
I put myself in a real tizzy. And so I was very reactive. I even was punitive with him, even when he was really little. Uh,
Mm,
and I realized this is not the way that I wanted to be. And this is not the relationship that I want to have with this little guy. And he deserves a mommy that can pull herself together enough to be able to um, help
just
him
thrive.
thrive and be the
Thrive.
person he's meant to be.
Mm,
And he had so many wonderful parts to him, much more wonderful parts than non-wonderful parts. But of course, when you're in that mindset, you can
yeah,
only focus on the not so good stuff.
exactly.
So that's when I found conscious discipline. I was like, you're a teacher. What are you, find something, look up classroom management and I bring it in your home. Who knew that before my child was even 2 years old, that I would be trying to find something to help with his behavior. I didn't know that a 2-year-old could misbehave. So I found conscious discipline. It resonated with me because it kept talking about the adult working on coaching
Hmm.
themselves first, moving their inner states from the lower parts of the brain up until that beautiful prefrontal lobe where all of our brilliance is. And then once we can move our own elevator up there, to then shift to the kid and work with the kid. But until we're up there, we have no business trying to shift the kid, because then we're just going to be doing a lot of the shaming, blaming, abandoning, and punishing
Yeah.
that we don't want to do. So we want to be able to empathize and encourage, and we want to be able to teach a new skill, and we want to be able to see past behavior and really understand the unsolved problems and the lagging skills that are behind those unsolved problems. So it was conscious discipline was just what I needed. I ate it. I devoured it. I read every book. I followed Dr. Becky Bailey around this country. If she was speaking, I tried to go there. If she was offering a workshop, I signed up. I hired my own parenting coach that
Hmm.
specialized in conscious discipline. She coached me. It was wonderful. And then by then I was already pregnant with my next baby. Um, and that baby, he got it from the womb. And something I want to say about my parenting journey that I've realized is because people would meet me and they would meet my children. Say you just met me with my older one when he was about anywhere from 2 years old to about 14 years old.
Hmm.
He was not internally organized in a certain way. There were a lot of cognitive skills that were lagging.
Okay.
And because of that, he had what I call some sideways behaviors.
Yeah.
But people judged my parenting. People
Interesting.
think you're too permissive. You don't punish him enough. You give him too many chances. And they would really come down on me. And then they would meet me with my little guy who's really internally organized. And it's not because he's a better kid than the other. And it's not because I'm
Right.
a better parent to one than the
At
other.
all.
But they would meet him and they would say, "What do you do? What's your secret?" And I'm thinking to myself, the secret, this is easy. That has nothing to do with me. He's just more internally organized. Thank God. But I think that we as parents have a lot of pressure on us, especially when we have a child that has challenging or concerning behaviors, because on top of trying to help our child develop into their best selves, we're also trying to handle our own emotions about their sideways behaviors, their unsolved problems, and their lagging skills, which can be really overwhelming.
Hmm.
And then we usually have society, whether it be other family members, it could be your own spouse, it could be a co-parent, your parents, giving you your friends trying to be helpful. Everybody
Everybody chiming in, right?
I'm telling you how you should
You
be.
should.
Right. And I always say, stop shitting on yourself and don't shit on me. So
Funny.
that became the theme of my life. And if it was, and it, I really developed like this huge assertiveness so that I could advocate for my son. Um, and I know I went off on a million tangents,
That's
but
okay.
my
We'll bring
parenting
it back.
journey was definitely has been unique. I am so grateful for it because if I didn't know how to find a voice for myself and I didn't know how to get myself in a place where I could be calm enough to find that voice and help my son, then I would have never been able to help other people. And there's this saying like one person's pain is another person's roadmap.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. And I love the way that you have, because I've heard you present before several times, and I love how you have developed that, how you've taken your story and your journey, plus obviously all of the extensive knowledge that you have as an educator and all of the different certifications that you have, and you've really created this blueprint for parenting, which I think is wonderful. I want to touch up, kind of piggyback on a couple of things that you said, and I know that one of the things that you want to do, and you mentioned it, is to, as humans first, before we become parents, it's important for us to be conscious and aware of our internal emotions, our internal things that are going on. How can parents get there? Where can a parent start to really become conscious and aware first as a human, so that when they're working with their child or even before they become parents, they're ready for it?
Absolutely. So, um, I I went to this talk one time, and this person drew a circle on the board and said the circle's 360 degrees. I hope they got that right. Yeah,
Yes,
360.
yes.
And they drew a little tiny sliver, and that little sliver was took about 10 degrees of the circle. Um, and the person said, "These are all the things that you know that you know."
Hmm.
And then they drew another little tiny sliver that took about 1% or 1 degree of the circle. And they said, these are all the things that you know that you don't know. And they said, the rest of this circle is all of the things that you don't know that you don't know. And that really stood out for me. That was one of those clarifying moments. I know you always talk about clarity.
Yeah.
That was one of those aha clarifying moments for me, because what I realized is that sometimes when I see other people or acting a different way, or something doesn't go the way I think it should,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily mean that's the only way to be. That's the only way that it should go. There are many ways to solve a problem. There are
Mm-hmm.
many ways to be. And so what I did is I really reflected on that, and I started thinking about all the times in my own life where I would become triggered by something. So what would bring up big emotions for me, whether it was anger or frustration or sadness or anxiety. And I would really start to become mindful of that. What is this? What is this situation? And
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying to myself, why am I getting like this? Because the why is just going to bring me back to the story that's in that little part that I've already identified that I know.
Good point.
But instead, if I say, what is this feeling that's coming up? Because sometimes you just have the stirrings of it and
Mm-hmm.
you're not sure what it is. And it could be a mixed bag as well. And when I say, what is that? And I wonder, now that I know this is anxiety, what is the message behind it? What am I supposed to know from this? How is this guiding me? And from there, I really learned to start to understand what really provokes these big emotions in me. Am I able to see something in a different way? Am I afraid to feel my emotion, or am I willing to lean into it? So just seeing that as a human being going through your
Mm-hmm.
own life, that's important. And when I check in with parents during my parent coaching, I will say to them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing today as a parent? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing today as a human being?
Right.
So then how do we start to transfer that to our parenting? It's really noticing those different situations that cause that stir of emotions. Another thing to be aware of is when you start having that running story, like you
Yeah.
already know what this means, or when somebody acts a certain way, what they must be thinking. Because if you're doing that with people in your life, you're going to definitely do that with your child. And if you're always coming into interactions predicting and assuming, then it's not going to get to unfold naturally, and you're going to miss out on a lot with your kid.
Yes. So true. And that sort of leads me right into the idea of mindfulness, which you have applied to parenting, but you call it mindful-ish parenting. So tell us a little bit about that, because I know there's uh, a lot there that has to do with obviously awareness and consciousness and breathing and pausing. So tell us a little bit about mindful-ish parenting.
Absolutely. So mindful-ish parenting is a less stressful way to incorporate mindfulness into your parenting. My experience has been that when I talk to parents about becoming more mindful in their parenting, having this awareness, and then from that space of awareness, recentering themselves before they parent, um, they get really intimidated. A lot of times
Hmm.
people think if you're going to be a mindful parent, that all of a sudden you're going to be doing yoga and having a vegetarian or vegan diet and you meditate. You don't have to do any of those things to be to bring mindfulness into your parenting practice. what we really want to do is learn how to be authentic, not just smile through things because we think that that's being calm,
Right.
nice, and mindful. We want to really show our emotions using I messages, not just saying everything's fine and okay when it's not.
Mm.
And we want to learn how to not be hijacked by our emotions, because once we are, then we're not present with our child anymore. We're in the past, or we're projecting something about the future. And where my idea of mindful ish came up is ish means to some extent. And if you can be mindful to even just some extent, you can make a huge difference in your relationship with your children. And as we know, if your relationship is solid, and you're connected, you're going to foster cooperation. So we don't have to try and be mindful. We don't always have to walk on eggshells and think, oh, did I say this right? Did I do
Right.
this right? Should I breathe? Should I tell my kid to breathe? It's about just having an awareness. And if your awareness is like, right now I'm losing my shiitake mushrooms and there's nothing I can do about it, then that's your awareness, and that today might be all that you got, and it's
Hmm.
okay. So that's what the ish is all about. It's knowing that you want to apply these principles. It's learning about these wonderful principles and using them when you can, and not worrying about it if you forget to or if you mess it up.
Yeah, it's not judging yourself as a parent. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. I think it's not about perfection, it's about progress. And for me, and part of my work is about clarity and it's about awareness. It's like you said, it's even if you're aware that you're losing it today, that's a step in the right direction to say, okay, you know what? Tomorrow is a different day. And I've loved that quote. I've said it on this podcast, I don't know how many times, by Maya Angelou. She always said, when you know better, you do better. So now I know better. I know that perhaps the way that I've approached my child without pausing first, taking a deep breath, and kind of regulating my emotions before I approached him or her was not the way I should have done it. And not to judge yourself, but just say, you know what, tomorrow is a different day, and it's a great opportunity to start over with a clean slate.
Yeah. And I just
Fran, yeah, go ahead.
piggyback on that for 1 second, because I even want to take the pressure off further.
Okay.
So I love that quote too. And when we know better, we do better. But here's my but. The part of your brain that knows and the part of your brain that can follow through with the action or that behavior are two separate parts of the brain. And this is metaphorically. I mean, obviously it's one big organ that works all together, but want to put out there. But the bridge between knowing what it is that you want to do, how you want to show up, and then being able to show up that way is self regulation.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the breathing comes in. That's where taking a step back and saying, what is this feeling that's coming up? What is this emotion stirring in me? That's where all that comes up. And people always want to skip that, but you can't outthink those stirrings. And those stirrings are in your nervous system. And that's why breath work is a part of my program, because if we're not able to put our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, back into more of a neutral state, no matter how much we want to show up differently, we won't. We'll keep going back to that same space that we don't like, and then we feel really frustrated.
Right. And the more that we learn
Mm.
exactly what you've just said now, to regulate our emotions, does that not automatically teach our children to do the same? Kind of like, I don't want to say by osmosis, but obviously they learn from watching. And I've even said in some of my parenting workshops, when you think they're not listening, when you think they're not watching, they are there. So
Mhm.
it's important to, kind of be mindful of what you're saying and what you're doing, because kids are like sponges. So, right, if we're learning to regulate our emotions, we're modeling for them how to do the same.
1000%.
Super important. I
Mhm.
want to kind of shift gears into another quote that I love by Mr. Rogers, and it says that He says, "I don't think anyone can grow unless he is loved exactly as he is now, appreciated for what he is rather than what he will be." And that kind of goes back to something that you said earlier. Um, I think as humans, we all just want to be seen and accepted and acknowledged. As parents, you had mentioned before that a lot of times we have this idea of who our kids will be. We have their whole life mapped out before us, from the time as women that we're pregnant. And sometimes our kids don't fit into a certain mold or a certain way of what we thought he or she would be. So I guess my question to you, Fran, is how can we help parents let go of that idea or expectation of who their child is according to the way they see it, and instead really learn to love and accept them exactly for who they are?
It's really tough for parents. It's really tough for parents because they, like you said, have these ideas and these expectations for who this person is or who they want this person to be. And um, and it's really sad when they don't get to fall in love with the person that's in front of them. Um, and I think that what's important to know is that we all come to earth with our own agenda. And when we try to pull a human away from their agenda, if it's something that is meant to happen for them, if it's something that was in their cards or in their stars, they're going to find a way to get there. And sometimes we have to learn not to stand in their way because we have different ideas.
Yeah.
So I think one of the most beautiful gifts that we can do for our children is learn to share power with them.
Mm.
Shared power instead of overpower or underpower. Um, when we have shared power with our children, we're not afraid of who they are. We
Mm.
celebrate who they are. We look at their uniqueness. And when they do have differences that we might not understand, we become experts in those differences so we can start to understand. Um,
Yeah.
when, you know, I've one of my sons, he fell in love with scootering and his whole scootering for like 2.5 years, and I learned all about scootering. That's not my cup of tea. You won't find me scootering later this
Right.
afternoon, but you better believe that I learned everything I can so that when he would talk about a trick or a part or an influencer, that I could have those conversations with him.
Right, because it's a way to connect with them
Yes,
and paying attention to them, and they're like, hey, mom is interested in this, and then they want to come to you and share as opposed to not doing
absolutely.
it.
Oh, yeah, it keeps the door of conversation open. And when they know that you care and they see you showing up for them and trying
Mm.
to take interest in what they care about, um, the most beautiful benefit is that when something else comes to mind that they need to discuss, you're already they're already used to sharing things with you.
Right.
And the other thing that I think is beautiful is that, like, I remember being in the kitchen one day and my son saying to me, Mommy, I don't really care too much about cooking, but I know how much you've learned about scootering. You want me to learn how to help you make some stuff?
uh,
Yeah, so that's where that cooperation comes from. When you are in a healthy relationship with somebody, you don't always have to like the same things, but when you respect what the other person's doing, when you try to show up for them, um, it comes back. It comes back around for you. It's called being in a relationship.
yeah. And
And I'm
so important, I'm sorry, so important as they get into those middle school years where, the age group you taught in high school,
yes.
that they want to be near you, they want to talk to you, they want to, share things with you, as opposed to the opposite, which is, being secretive and keeping things
Right.
and just being
And
isolated.
those kinds of conversations start though when our children are infants and toddlers,
Yeah.
believe it or not. So even though long ago, which was almost 25 years ago, that I became a teacher and wanted to be in middle school, but since then I have become I am a self-taught expert on development. I've had to understand it tremendously to help my son
Right.
develop best. And then I have I ended up teaching first grade for many years, and I've worked with many preschools, helping them with their behavior and social emotional curriculums and implementation. Um, but I just lost my train of thought when I what I was going to say about that. And if it comes back to me,
That's okay.
I'll let you know. Oh, I know what it was. And it's so important. So I don't want I would
Good.
miss if I didn't say it. So those conversations with teenagers and preteens, they don't happen by accident.
Mm-mm.
When our children are little and they tell us so many things, very often we're very quick to say, should you be telling me that? Or go handle this yourself. Or
Mm.
why are you telling me again? And children start to learn from that. I shouldn't share everything with her. I don't it's or him. It could be dad saying that too. And what's interesting is that by the time they get to a point where you want them to share, you've
Then they
turned
don't.
off that sharing button that they genuinely had with you when they were little. And so when there are many ways to handle tattletaling, there are many ways
Mm.
to handle what to share, when to share it. And those are whole things that I could do a whole workshop on for
Whole
days.
nother one on that.
But I just want to, and I'm not saying that everybody should just, accept if their kid like tattletales on other kids all day long. That's not what I'm trying to put out there. But what I'm saying is our response to our children telling us things when they're young is what shapes their
Right.
willingness to share with us when they're older.
And I want to add to that, I think how present we are when they're sharing is important as well. Because if they notice that mom's listening or dad's listening, but they're also on their phone or they're paying attention to brother or sister more than my story that I'm telling them, I think they get to the point where it's like, oh, why bother? They don't really care. And so it builds that mom and dad are not really interested. And then it comes to the point where you really want them to, that they
Mm-hmm.
kind of just tune out.
Yeah. And then parents feel really like upset, like we're not close, or the
Right.
doesn't trust me. And trust begins with listening. And if we've
Mm.
not been a healthy listener and have not modeled healthy listening in our parent child relationship, it's not going to be available very easily when the kids get older. We can
Yes.
rework it, but it'll take because what we have to rework is trust.
Yeah. Yeah, it all starts foundational from
Mhm.
the time they're very little. It's like you said, it's building layer upon layer of a relationship, a connection over years that will continue to flourish from the time they're adults, and then they come back and they bring their kids, and and it's just a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Fran, you say that misbehavior is a child's way of communicating an unmet need, and I believe that too. How can parents really be in tune to this and address those needs?
So for me, behavior is just a signal.
Hmm.
It's communicating that I need help with something, or I don't know a better way to do this, or I don't have the impulse control or emotional regulation to handle this right now in a more appropriate way. And another model that I'm very fond of, and I'm working towards a certification in right now, but I'm
Okay.
not there yet. It's been a
Okay.
lot of hard work, and I pray that I get it. is called Collaborative and Proactive Solutions. CPS is the acronym. The founder and developer is Dr. Ross Green. And in the CPS iceberg model, we show that, or Dr. Green shows that behavior is the tip of the iceberg. It's the part that we see.
That we see.
Yeah. And that's why it's a signal, it's alerting us. And beneath that is, right under the surface, is what he calls an unsolved problem. And an unsolved problem is just another way in CPS of saying an unmet expectation. So there's an expectation or expectations that the child is not meeting. They're usually not able to meet it because beneath those unmet expectations or unsolved problems are lagging skills. And a lot of parents are like, no, my kid has this skill, or she can do this when she's with her father, or he doesn't act like that at school. And what the whole CPS model is based on is that when a child's environment, which again includes the adult in the environment, when the demands of that environment outstrip the child's skills, then you will end up with big behaviors and you will have an unmet expectation. So how do we start to shift this? We start to become aware of those unsolved problems. And we look beneath the behavior. We look past that behavior and we say to ourselves, I'm noticing that my child has difficulty stopping using the iPad at 8 p.m. to take a shower. If we were just to look at the behavior, and if you say it was time to turn off the iPad, go take a shower, the child, if you look at the behavior, is ignoring you, then slams it shut and screams and yells.
Yeah.
Then refuses to take a shower. Maybe a younger kid will run around the room or try to hide, or they'll try and hide with the iPad. Those are all just signals saying, I don't know how to come to this stop and transition into the next thing that I am to do. And beneath that is a lagging skill. And there could be multiple lagging skills.
Right.
It could be about emotional regulation, frustration tolerance, adaptability. It could even be about just communication skills. So it's about looking beneath the behavior. And once you can change your lens and start looking beneath the behavior, the next step is starting to identify, getting that running list of what are these unsolved problems. And there is a free guide on Dr. Green's website, and that guide is called an ALSUP. It stands for Assessment of Lagging Skills and Unsolved Problems. And there's even a video on the website that tells parents how to fill it out and how to start creating this document, because that document's going to make us proactive. It's no longer a surprise that your child has difficulty smelling macaroni and cheese. It's no longer a surprise that your child has difficulty waking up by 7 a.m. on school days. We already know that this is an unmet expectation. So it's becoming aware, it's seeing beneath behavior, and then creating this proactive list so that we can start problem solving with our child collaboratively.
I love that. I love that there's steps in it. And I'll go ahead and add that information to the podcast toolkit so that parents can access that.
Great.
And, it's interesting because it's not that the children literally just want to defy you, or just, they wake up today and say, oh, let me see how I can just bother mom and dad today. Let me see what kinds of things I can do to just set them off. No, there is behavior underneath that. And that's, I love the way that you said that. Speaking of behavior, we'll be going back to school in a few weeks. And it's a different school year than it was last year. Last year was a year of some of the kids were at home because of COVID. Some were actually in the school building, but it was very different in the school building. So with the new year around the corner, I'm assuming that there are children that are going to have some difficulty with this new change and may even have a little emotional triggers or anxiety behind it. So what are some things that you think you can tell parents to help ease their children back into school?
It's really important that we keep conversation open with our children about returning to school and really hearing what their concerns are if they feel it's going to be difficult.
Hmm.
And an example that I love to give is when a child says, I don't want to go back to school. I hate school.
Hmm.
Often, a very unconscious response would be, what are you talking about? You love school. You love it so
Right.
much. So we dismiss the child's experience.
Yeah.
Instead, let's take a deep breath and understand that because this child is saying it doesn't mean that they are never going to go back to school. And it also might not even mean that they hate school. They might not have the ability to communicate what they're feeling differently.
Right. Right.
So instead, let's get curious. And we start by just reflecting back and then adding a clarifier. You hate school and you don't like to go. Tell me more about that.
I like that. Kind of gives them a like sort of like a space to discuss and to actually think about it themselves. What do I mean by that?
Right. Because that first statement is coming from a really emotional place. And that
Yeah.
that reflection and that clarifying statement brings them back here into that prefrontal lobe where they can have that awareness. If you say something like, why did you say that? That keeps them
Yeah.
in that emotional state. Or why would you say that? That keeps them in the emotional state. So we want to really help them get back up here. You don't like school and you don't want to go back. I'm confused. Can you tell me more? So just reflection, 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 clarifying, asking for more, helping them understand, letting them know I'm trying to understand your perspective so that I can be helpful. And then working with them on a solution,
Mm,
not just imposing one on the
right.
kids. Like,
Yes, in a very safe, open, non-punitive, non-judgmental, not shaming the child for saying what they said, and just say, like you said, getting curious. Let's have a discussion about that. Tell me more. I love the tell me more.
yeah, those are actually drilling strategies from Dr. Green's CPS model. And he has a free downloadable, printable worksheet of the different strategies. There's 8 different strategies. He gives
So
examples
helpful.
of them. It's so helpful. It's really keeping that child in that thinking phase more instead of that feeling space so that we can really get to the heart of what they're trying to say. We can understand their concerns. And the purpose is that when we problem solve with them, we can't make an informed decision about solutions with our children if we don't really know what's concerning them.
And again, it goes back to connecting with them. It's not about controlling our children, or like you said, it's about the connection with them, and it's a connection that lasts a lifetime, and it starts early on from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Fran, for just so much information that you have given us today. I think it's a lot to think about, and it's so helpful. All our guests answer this final question, and it's more of a personal question to you is, and what's been a moment of clarity in your own life, whether recently or from long ago, and what did it teach you?
Um, I feel really blessed. I've had many moments of clarity. I wake up every single day, and part of my morning prayer is, please let me learn something today and be humble enough to know who my teacher is.
Wow.
Um, and something that was a very clarifying moment for me recently was hearing my son talk about me to somebody else and my parenting.
Wow.
And he wasn't speaking very favorably about me.
That's not good.
And what was so clarifying about that is understanding that in that moment, that was his perspective. And what was so clarifying about that, and I think this is where we get tripped up as parents, is that because that's his perspective, and of course I always want to have those listening ears and that listening heart that takes this information so that I can do something with it, instead of defending myself and being like, I can't believe you said that to so and so, how could you think that? Instead I was able to say, I heard you talking to so and so, and I heard what you were saying, and I was wondering if that meant that you were hoping that I'd spend more time with you. Because when I really sat with it in my heart, that's what I felt he was trying to say. But when I presented it to him, I said it in a way that I was seeking to understand. So if I didn't get it right, hopefully he would feel safe enough to tell me so. But it was also clarifying because it doesn't mean I'm a bad parent. It means we have this moment, or he's experiencing some disconnect with me, and it doesn't mean that we have a broken relationship.
Right.
We're going to wax and wane with closeness and conflict is a very healthy part of a connected relationship.
Sure.
What's not healthy is when we hit below the belt, or we say things and create these ultimatums, or we become very black and white about whatever's going on.
Right. Or there's disrespect.
Right. Or disrespect. So instead it's, hearing that information and using it as a stepping stone for discussion and conversation. But I felt really proud of myself, because even though I practice all of these things, and we even said there's no such thing as a perfect parent. I am definitely not. I don't have perfectly behaved children. My children and myself, we all have a lot of unsolved problems that we're working together to solve. But that clarity was, in that moment, I am a good parent and my child feels disconnected right now. So what can we do?
Right. What's the next step? And having that conversation with him was your first step. Well, kind of thinking to yourself and reflecting, which is so important to do that first, and then going to speak to him, because you had already the foundation of communication to be able to approach him about it. What a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Fran, I always like to end the podcast with something fun, and it's called the recommended segment. So I'm going to give you 4 different topics, and you're just going to say what you recommend in each of them. So are you a Netflix watcher? Are you kind of do a little Netflix?
Yes.
You do? Okay. Give us your Netflix pick of the moment.
Virgin River. Nothing to do with parenting. Just pure indulgence, part of my self-care, enjoying a wonderful show.
Beautiful. Yes. I saw it, and I just finished this past season pretty quickly too. What about a product that you use that you'd like to recommend? It could be on any product for anything.
A product that I use. I just got this product, and I don't know the name of it, so it's probably not helpful, but it's this thing that, like, when you wash your face afterwards, you rub it all over. It's supposed to take out all the wrinkles. I haven't used it yet.
Is it like a little thing that you kind of massage? It's a roller?
It is like, but it's more like this, like, zappy, ion-y thing happening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what it is, but we'll do a before and after.
Well, if you remember, just text me or email me, and I'll add that to the toolkit as well. What about a great book? Do you have a good book to recommend?
I just started the most wonderful book, and it's called You're Not Listening.
Hmm.
And I'll also have to give you the author's name. It is fabulous. It is about the last art of listening that has and how we are suffering from not listening to one another, and how because social media is so big right now,
Yeah.
social media is not so much about listening, it's more about telling
Hmm.
and putting something out there. And it goes back to this whole two-way street of what listening is. And listening is the foundation of every relationship. It's the foundation of human connection. And in this book, the author speaks about it's the first sense to develop, and it's one of the last senses to run out. Even if you have hearing loss,
Hmm.
it's one of the last senses to leave us at the end.
Wonderful. I'll get the author from you.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, an IG account other than your own that you would like to share that you follow and you like.
And I love, oh my goodness, what is her name? She's Peaceful Parenting. Janet Lansbury. Oh my gosh,
Okay.
that was like escaped my mind. Janet Lansbury. I love her messages. I love her Instagram. She puts a lot of information in one little chunk, and I find it really helpful.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to get all of those and put them on our podcast toolkit.
Great.
Fran, any final thoughts or parting words? I know you do have something, a special gift for our listeners that I will add to our toolkit. I'll add the link so listeners can get it. Can you tell us a little bit about what your gift is for them?
Yes, my gift is a complimentary discovery call for parent coaching. And it's really unique because most people do a 15 to 30-minute discovery call, but I
Right.
understand that parenting is complex.
Yeah.
I also know if you have a child that is has concerning or challenging behaviors, that adds a lot to the complexity. So my discovery calls are 50 minutes.
Wow.
If you are not a candidate for my program, or you don't think I'm a match for you, I believe in always keeping the door open, and I will refer you to other resources that I believe could be helpful on your journey.
Wonderful. Such value. Thank you so much. Once again, Fran, thank you, thank you, thank you for being here today and just sharing so honestly, so authentically, just all of your information on parenting and mindful-ish parenting that I know will help our listeners. So thank you once again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, if this podcast, I hope it did spark the insight within. To get this episode's toolkit, you can go over to my website at JeanetteMelian.com/podcast. To learn more about parenting coach Fran Rubio-Katz, you can go follow her at coach_Franny or head over to her website at coachfranny.com. Until next time, I send you love and light. May your cup be full and overflowing.